Wrestling towards the line, Jack O'Neill! And O'Neill's gone for the field goal! Batted back, O'Neill! Taylor's chin cutting pass to O'Neill! O'Neill goes in!
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Be The Player podcast. This podcast is for the player, by the player. My name is Jack O'Neill. Welcome back. We are in store for a big week 2 of the semi-finals, but we also have to go through the week 1 action that we just saw earlier in the week. It has been a really good week of footy. Of course, the Mines regular season also got wrapped up with some big games, so shout out to those guys. But on today's podcast, we are going to go through the week 1 review of the finals. We're going to go through every single finals game, and I'm going to share my thoughts on it, give some bold predictions as well. Before then, I've got, unfortunately, due to time constraints, I was not able to get Chrissy Lord on the podcast, but I have got one better. He has given me a big statement. I'm going to go through it and I'm going to analyze it, because the Cowboys, they made some pretty questionable decisions. So hopefully I can get Chris on later on in the week. And then we're going to go through week 2. We're going to preview this week's game between the South Sydney Rabbitohs and the North Queensland Cowboys before we'll wrap up the podcast with our season reviews of the bottom 4 teams. That is the Raiders, Warriors, Eels and Panthers. We are in store for a huge podcast. I apologise. Let's get straight into it with our week 1 review. Yes, it was a big week in the SRL. We saw 2 big finals games played, and it was really entertaining footy from both teams. I really enjoyed it, or from all teams, sorry. I really enjoyed it. We're going to go through both the Seagulls and the Cowboys games and the Rabbitohs and the Broncos games. I am going to try and keep this podcast a little bit shorter than usual. Sort of the half an hour to 45 minutes would be preferred, which is why I haven't got as much content this week. I think that, I want to try and condense it a bit more so you get more quality over quantity. But, I want you guys to let me know as well which length of podcast you prefer, whether you prefer the long ones or the short ones. So without further ado, let's get straight into the review. So, the first game, I was in the commentary box with Logan Strange himself for the Seagulls, taking on the Cowboys at Manly, Brookvale Oval, I don't know, 4 Points Park, now I believe it's called. And, Manly again, they're just too good, man. The Cowboys, they showed they could stick it with the top teams, like they did a couple weeks ago too, but they just couldn't do it for the whole 80, and Manly are just too relentless. Like I said, the Cowboys, they started so well, I'd say they owned the first sort of 20-odd minutes. Then the Cowboys, they ended the first half with a lot more control, but the Cowboys' control in that opening half of the first half was very strong. Damien Moana and Rahan Taval were kicking into corners, they were making their tackles, they were doing really well, but the Manly, they're just too good. They just stick to you, and they keep going, they're relentless, they never stop. You can't keep them out of the game forever, and that's what we've seen. If they win this premiership, I have no doubt in my mind that it is a dynasty. That is for sure, for certain. The Cowboys, they scored first through Bunty Cambola with a beautiful try. I got pretty hyped up in commentary, but then, Manly, they just scored 2 quick-fire tries, and all of a sudden, they're taking control of the first half again, and then they scored a try, I think, straight after half-time too, 18-6, and you're thinking, oh, God, this could get ugly. But then the Cowboys, they scored 2 quick-fire tries, and things looked like they were starting to take control, but then, it's just how it works. The Manly player stands up like always, and this time it was Tyrone Clay. He stood up with a huge run. Chaz Dingo scores his second try off of the back of Tyrone's brilliance, and, Tyrone had such a good game. Chaz Dingo and Tyrone. For Chaz, he had 185 run meters, 8 line breaks and 2 tries. For Tyrone, 230 run meters and 1 try. But I want to talk about Chaz. Chaz Dingo, for me, is without a doubt the best player in the SRL at the moment. And, I know people can say he's probably having a quieter year than usual, but he just stands up when you need him to. He just gets involved when you need him to. and it's just something about him. He's just different to other players, and I think he deserves big raps for how good Manly are going. It's off the back of the great Chaz Dingo. But the Cowboys, their defense against outside backs is pretty poor. Dingo and Tyrone Clay really ran laps around them on pretty much every single kick return. So they'll definitely need to work on their defense a little bit. I think Kobe Johnston playing centre was not the right decision at all. He definitely looked out of sorts defensively with those little guys running at him. It worked against Parramatta, but this is just a different unit, the Manly Sea Eagles. Manly, are they certainties? That's the question I want to pose to the listeners. I think they are. I can't see the Manly Sea Eagles losing the grand final. I just think they're just too good. I think that's the real challenge, is them not getting complacent, which it doesn't look like they are. But the grand finals are big occasions. They've got to be confident, but not too confident, if that makes sense. And I do. That's my only concern about Manly, is complacency, because they're just so good. The Cowboys have tried twice, they can't beat them. South's pushed them at times earlier this season in their game, but I can't see South's even beating the Cowboys this week, if I'm honest. You look at the Cowboys, their forwards played pretty well. Robert Mobston, 117 run meters, 25 tackles, no misses, a good knock from him, and Thomas Wallace made 28 tackles, but they were very far from impressive. However, I do like some of the changes they made this week, and we will get into that in our preview. But we've got another game that took place during the week, and that was the South Sydney Rabbitohs taking on the Brisbane Broncos. South Sydney, I said they peaked, and I guess I got to eat my words there, but I'm not going to eat them to a certain extent, and I'll get into that in a minute. But the Rabbitohs, they absolutely demolished the Broncos. I think it was 44-12. Really poor performance from the Broncos. The Broncos make an error in the first set, and Leo Ryan scores off the scrum in the first minute. And from there, the game was really sloppy, honestly. It was until about the 20th minute when O'Hare scored off of some really good play from Logan Guys. And then, it ends up being 24-0 at half-time. But there were 11 errors in the first 40. 6 for the Broncos, 5 for South Sydney. That is diabolical from both sides. You cannot be making that many errors in this competition. Compare that to the Manly Sea Eagles in the first half of the Cowboys game. They were 100% completion. I think they finished with, only one incomplete set, the Manly Sea Eagles. I could be wrong, but, that's what the good teams do, and neither of those teams were doing that. But the difference was South was just finding points, whereas the Broncos couldn't find anything. And then, it was, there was just a little thought in my head. I'm thinking, the Broncos, they could, pull out one of those miracle second half performances that they have done so well this season, but they just, such poor options, very poor options from the Broncos in attack. Defensively, it was just arm grabbing. And it sums up their season, to be honest, in the sense of the inconsistency. The fact that they could ambush South Sydney last week and then this week get absolutely embarrassed by them. They did it so often this season. They'd have a really good game, then a really poor game, then a really good game, then a really poor game. But they are going to have a lot to build on. I'm going to review these teams, the two teams that get eliminated from the finals in next week's podcast. And that's what I'll say in the Broncos podcast, is that they've got a lot to build on. They've got some really good players going there. So they're in a good position moving forward. But based off of this season was really poor from them. Especially considering, that South Sydney were not great in this game either. And to be honest, the Rabbitohs, I don't think they're back. Or I still don't think that they're at that high level. That will probably beat the Cowboys now. And, you'll all say, what does this dickhead know? But they made 10 errors to Brisbane's 9 and a 44-12 victory. Imagine if they made 3 to 5 errors. They would have won by 100. Because they were that good, but they don't build pressure. They just drop silly balls. They throw silly passes still. And they're coming up against the Cowboys, who are the second best team in this competition. I think there is a huge gap from Manly right at the top. The Cowboys, there's a big gap between Manly and the Cowboys. And then there's a huge gap between the Cowboys and the Rabbitohs at the moment. Then there's a huge gap between the Rabbitohs and the rest of those teams. And I think that they're going to need to be really, really good if they're going to beat the Cowboys. But I'm basically previewing this week's game now. But, you know, to the Rabbitohs' credit, they played some really, really good attacking footy when they weren't making errors. Liam Ryan, probably his best performance in a fullback jersey, maybe. He made 215 run meters and scored a try. He was really, really strong. Logan Guys, 175 meters, 17 tackles and 1 try assist. He set up Aaron O'Hare with a barnstorming run. For the Broncos, I struggled big time to find some notable performers, apart from this man, Sam Herbin, who had 140 run meters and scored 2 tries. 140 run meters, I hope I said. I'm not sure if it was 130, but he tried his absolute backside off, and he didn't deserve to be in a losing side. He kept the Broncos in that game with some of his really good running, but the Broncos just weren't good enough. I also had Dan Mason. I had a look at his stats. I thought he was pretty strong too. 127 meters and 21 tackles. But, yeah, I do still worry about the Rabbitohs, but, you know, they'll take the win, and I think that they'll be able to recognise what they need to work on, and I'm excited. I think that they can. I'm really pumped to see how they go against the Cowboys, but I still do have a lot of concerns. That is the preview done and dusted. Now we need to get straight into the sit down where I'm going to go through a media release from Chris Lord. Yes, I was meant to have Chris Lord on the podcast today, but unfortunately due to scheduling difficulties, I was unable to get him on. Mainly my fault on my end, but he did give me a press release to read to you guys. I'm going to go through it because there's been some pretty interesting decisions made from the Cowboys, some good and some pretty poor, so let's get right into it. First of all, we found when we were playing Manly the first time, even games before that our outside defence was letting us down. And see, I do agree with that, but it let them down again, and I see where he's going to get to from here when he says, Moana and I, after watching the tapes over and over, decided we needed to shore up our defence in the centre, so Kobe Johnston was moved into the centre to do exactly that. What we found from that was an improvement in our defence, keeping Joey Kelly to low metres in the Eels game and KCK/Dingo relatively contained in the first semi-final. To be fair, he was on that right side, so I can see where they're coming from. I will get the game stats up now, but while I'm doing that, I think I don't know, man. I just don't think it was the right decision, but this is me in hindsight. I do think that they're right. He did help shut down those guys. Joey Kelly, they mentioned. He did do a good job on Joey Kelly. Joey Kelly didn't get involved at all, but you look at Kobe Johnston's stats on the weekend, 8 tackles, 9 misses, so he was still well and truly outplayed in the centres and didn't shore up that defence at all, so, you know, in hindsight, not a good decision, especially in a big game like finals. You need your best players in their best positions. It was hard putting Kobe there as he's one of our best players and usually makes so many metres on the edge at the start of our sets. Yep. Having Bunty come off at half was also an idea we had toyed with because we knew he'd come back on. Having Wellesley and Wallace playing 80 was also nice instead of sharing 40. That's why I played prop in the semi. Unfortunately, I messed up the subs and I never came back on, and neither did Bunty. That meant the team ran out of juice towards the end and we struggled to beat best Manly. I do agree with that. Because of his mess up in the substitutions, we didn't see Bunty Cambolo come back on like he did against, it's Parramatta again, and he just ripped them to shreds, and he put them back in the game, the Cowboys, when they were looking pretty average. So that definitely does play a part in a pretty bad performance. I didn't mention that earlier. However, you know, Wellesley and Wallace, the thing that worked good about having Kieran Wells, that's who he's talking about there, coming off the bench, is he came on fresh and he provided something different, and then Wallace moved into lock. I really liked that rotation. I didn't think it needed to be changed. Again, in hindsight, I'm not the one making the decisions. I've got a lot less pressure on me than Chris Lord, so I don't want to keep slamming Chris because he's doing a great job. I think he's one of the best captains in the game. But for me, I think that was another decision that probably didn't need to be made, and I think it was just out thinking the room a little bit. This semi, we have opted with our usual lineup, me back at lock with Wallace/Wells sharing hooker, Kobe back at second row, and Gronk, Columbus, and Smith sharing the centres. Moana and I are really happy with our team, and we know we have options when it comes to our lineup, which is exciting for us. We are a team looking for a ring, and we will make sure we put the best team out there on the day to get it done. Almatagi and Luca are overdue for a huge game, and we can't wait to see them against the Bunnies. Yeah, so on what he said here, I like his changes that he's made, especially having Kobe back in the second row. That's definitely his best position, and I love the the Wells and Wallace combination in the hooking as well. Excuse me. But what he says here about Almatagi and Luca, I really agree. I think that, they both tried hard. They tried to get in the game against Manly, but they were just handled really well. And, that's something that I mentioned about Chaz Dingo, is how smart he is, how he was always positioning himself where Almatagi and Luka Moscow were going to make breaks, so he could straight away tackle them and not get their go forward. So they need to work their way around that. I think Liam Ryan, he's a smart footballer. He's definitely going to be on that, but I'll get into that in the preview. Our forward pack is back to full strength and expect to see us making good meters up the middle. Our halves pairing has done amazing for us this year, and our kicking has often been the difference. Looking ahead to the Bunnies, we'll need a good defensive outing to keep their backs contained and limit the meters their forwards can make on us. O'Hare and Liam Ryan are players we will look to target. Hope we can get the dub. He's a good leader, Chris Lord. He admits his mistakes. There's a lot of context behind a lot of the decisions he made, and I think he's made the best. He's named the best possible lineup for the Cowboys to book a grand final spot. We have got a big game coming up in the semi-finals. This is the preliminary final. The winner of this game heads straight into the grand final to play the Manly Seagulls. The Cowboys taking on the South Sydney Rabbitohs. The Rabbitohs, they finally had a big performance last week. Of course, they've had some pretty bang average performances this year. To be honest, they haven't even really put a team to the sword at all this season, so they'll be looking to do that until last week, when they play the North Queensland Cowboys. The Rabbitohs, they've got to cut out the stupid errors in their game, or they are not going to get far. I think the Cowboys will take full advantage of the errors that South Sydney have made, whereas the Broncos, they couldn't last week. The Cowboys are looking to bounce back at home with a complete 80-minute performance. That's the big one. They've got to play for 80 minutes. They can't clock off on any of these big players like they did last week to Chaz Dingo and Tyrone Clay. For the Rabbitohs, they haven't been able to beat a top 2 side all season, and if there's any time to do it, it's now. It's do or die. They need to beat the Cowboys. For the Cowboys again, Almatagi, he just needs some space. He's been unable to find much space in and around the defensive line of either teams, and I think it's mainly Chaz Dingo has given other teams the blueprint, and the Manly in general, on how to limit Almatagi. They limited him against Manly the first time they played this season, then the Eels did it, and now Manly did it again. So the Rabbitohs, they've got a blueprint there on how to shut down Tyler the Terrorizer. But let's look at the changes to both lineups. We, of course, went through Chris Lord's changes already in the agenda, but Chris Lord will move back to lock, Wallace to 9, and Wells to the bench. Love that change. Columbus back to centre, Johnston to the second row, and Irwin to the bench. Good decision to have Johnston back in the second row too. I think that Johnston and Kalsakau are very, very, very underrated second row pairing, and I think that Kobe and Jamal are in for a big game against South Sydney's back row, especially with Drake Dranigan, who is injured. I'll just check the South Sydney side's changes. So they've got Tallis Riff starting in the second row. They've also got Drake Dranigan coming off the bench. So that's the only real change that I can see. They have been... so Drake Dranigan actually played the lock last week. Right, my apologies. Jake Tuss played off the bench, but he has moved into lock. Drake Dranigan to the bench. So Good decisions, I think, from Jai. I think that he's made the right call. I have really liked Drake Dranigan. I like him better on the edge than in the middle personally, but that's just me. I think that this is. I can't see South winning it because I think they just still have too many errors in their game, and that's pretty much it. I just can't see them winning this game. I think the Cowboys have too much class. I think it really comes down to the backs and which team's backline can defend the best, but then also get their teams into the best position and get the most points. And I think the Cowboys backline will do that. I was very wrong about the Rabbitohs. I tipped Brisbane again last week, I believe, but I think the Cowboys will win 1-12. But I'm actually almost leaning towards 13 plus. I think the Cowboys will be too good for the Rabbitohs and will book a place in the grand final. Now, let's head straight into the reviews for every single team in Season 3. Yeah, I think that a lot of the bottom 4 teams will be missing the attention. Of course, they missed out on the finals in Season 3. But now I'm going to go through and talk about each one. Maybe they don't want this attention, to be honest, because the first team I am going to talk about are the Penrith Panthers. The Panthers, they were unable to get a single win in Season 3 with the worst attack and defense statistically. They unable to really settle on a spine. I'm not really sure why Mark Lee wasn't given an extended run at 7 because they looked better with him at 7 in my opinion. But I think they probably were building to the future. I think that they've signed 2 really good halves now, so I think that they decided that they were going to, keep Mark at hooker next season. I just feel so bad for the Panthers because it's not for lack of trying. It was just for lack of experience and lack of class. Their most valuable player by far, Brodie Kennedy. He averaged 183 metres and scored 8 tries, which was the most out of any player in Season 3. He averaged just a little bit over 1 try per game. So good strike rate for Brodie. Their best performance, it's a loss, but it was still their best performance of the season. It was their 22-18 loss to the Cowboys. They almost had it won, but the Cowboys snatched it at the death. I thought that was a really spirited performance, but their worst performance has to be their 40-4 loss to my Canberra Raiders. It just was not a good night out. For the Panthers, they've made some notable signings, though. They're bringing in guys like Luke Malkus, Ash Crutcher, Isaac Edwards, Tomo Mack, and Cameron Relentless. I like Luke Malkus. He's going to bring a lot of grunt to their forward pack, whereas Ash Crutcher and Isaac Edwards, they're 2 big signings, and I think they can definitely help, close up those close games that the Panthers were in. Because if the Panthers win these close games, let's just get the results up now. Because the Panthers, for the most part, were never really out of a game, if that makes sense. I'm going to get the results. Give me 1 second. Here we go. So they obviously lost by 36 to the Raiders. Not good. But lost by 2 to Parramatta, 7 to South Sydney, 1 to the Brisbane Broncos, 4 to the North Queensland Cowboys, 18 to Manly, and 24 to the Warriors. So, Manly and the Warriors, not good performances, and Canberra, but you look at 1, 2, 3, 4 games were decided by less than 12 points, right? Yeah, all less than 12 points, all 7 points or less. If they win 4 of those games, 1, 2, 3, 4, if they win all 4 of those games, then they're in the finals, are they not? Well, they would have been a level with the Broncos and with South Sydney. And you know what? Close games too. The other games were thrashings, though. Wouldn't have helped their for and against. Would they still have made finals? Probably not. We're talking a lot of ifs, but even if they had won 3, all of a sudden they are way up the standings. Or if they won 2, then they're even with Parramatta. So they were in a lot of games, but they just couldn't get the victories. They couldn't get the wins. which is disappointing for Penrith Panthers fans. Hopefully they have a better season next season. Their notable losses, they've lost some pretty good players. Jordan Williams has left after just one season. He's going to Canberra. Josh Saddle-Cart, good young player coming through, has shown a lot of potential, but I think he's got a lot of defensive issues in his game. So I think he's someone that they probably wanted to try and get some experience with, which they did with Tomo Mack. James Thorne, a club legend, but I think it was a good time for them to end that relationship before it got too ugly, if I'm honest, with Hayden Davis, Simon Hunt, and Hayden Melhurt also leaving. So the recruitment and retention rating, I'm going to go ahead and give them a B. I don't think it was bad. Do I think it's been the greatest retention? No, I definitely don't. Recruitment-wise, though, has been really strong. I love those new halves. I love Tomo Mack in the centres. That's a really underrated one. And Luke Malchus and Cameron Relentless in the forwards. Righto, the next team to review are the Parramatta Eels. They had a really disrupted year, full of leadership changes, poor performances, and bad attitudes. Charlie Butler was a player that was told shape up or ship out after a really, really poor showing from him last season, especially given his attitude at training. Apparently, there were a lot of reports during the year. They had some really, really poor performances as well, not to mention a lot of leadership change. They could never really settle on a leadership crew, but they've got Luke Short at the helm now, which I think is a really, really good thing for them. Let's go through some of their, let's go through their fullbacks. They had three fullbacks: Eli Barnes, Damien Shelford, and Joey Kelly. All spent time at fullback, so they couldn't settle on a spine, couldn't settle on a number one. And not to mention that a club legend in Tim James was allowed to depart halfway through the season, but I think that was Luke Short just going, screw it, I'm rebuilding this joint. He doesn't want to be here, he can go. I think their MVP was probably Joey Kelly. I think he was probably their most dangerous and looked their most likely each game. When he was on, they were definitely a lot better. He averaged 143 run meters and scored 4 tries. Their best performance, I think it was definitely 24-22 win against the Panthers. They played some good footy. They hung in there. They showed a lot of resilience and a lot of desperation. It wasn't even that good of a performance, though. They were lucky that the Panthers didn't keep piling on the pressure. There was a lot of controversy in that game. But their worst performance of the season was definitely that 32-30 loss to Brisbane. How they managed to lose that game after leading by such a margin. I think it was like 30-6 or 24-6 or 24-0 or something like that at halftime. I'll never know. But they've made some notable signings. Cherry Evans heading to the club. He's an Australian representative. Michael Crimp heading aboard. He's a good signing. X Factor. He'll be a good replacement for Joey Kelly. Thomas Mendonca as well, solid outside back, doesn't score many tries, and he knows it, but I think he is definitely a guy that could provide something for them. And also Dawson Swarm is headed to the club, but they've lost some big players as well, some huge players too, if I'm honest. Joey Kelly, yeah, I'm not even going to speak on Joey Kelly, if I'm honest. Samuel Lillard, good front rower, but has not hit his straps at all. Was really good at Canberra. Hopefully he can find some form. Jaden White, yeah, one of those relationships that just needed to end, I think, before. Similar to a James Thorne. Has played good footy in patches, but needed a fresh change. Eli Barnes and Tim James both going to Canberra. I think time was just about up for those legends as well, but they're club legends and they will be remembered for that. Their recruitment and retention rating, I'm going to give them a B as well. I think that some of their signings are looking pretty solid. In fact, I'm going to give them a B-. I do think that they lack in certain areas. I think they're going to need to definitely dip into the Mines talent pool. But they've got guys like Michael Crimp and Thomas Mendonca coming to the club. But they've lost some huge players as well. Now, next up, we do have the New Zealand Warriors. I think they were really unlucky to miss out on finals this season. They showed so much heart all season, but they just got unlucky in some games, I think, and they just lacked a bit of class, which I think they should hopefully be able to solidify with some of their new signings. So we'll take a look over here, they started the season off as a really good defensive unit. I think they were about second in defence for a lot of this season, but they just struggled to score until Jai McCartney arrived mid-season, and he's really helped reinvent their attack, and he's also done a lot for their club culture too, Big Jai. However, the game management, even with Jai, has still let them down at times, but you know what? They were in a lot of games just based off passion. They pushed Manly and North Queensland, which is a pretty big effort. They also were, out of a few games, but I'd never say they're really out of a game, actually, like against every team, they were either winning or not too far behind, which is why, for me, their best performance was their 28-12 win versus the Broncos. It was just a spirited performance from the team, whereas their worst, I'm going to go the 14-0 loss to South Sydney. But you know what? It was hard to find a worse performance because they were good in most of those games. They showed a lot of good signings. Their MVP, for me, Patrick Corcoran, 164 average run meters this season. I think he did a really good job shifting from hooker into lock, but I would like to see him return to hooker personally, and I was really impressed with him all season, and he was pretty unlucky to not make his New South Wales debut. As for their notable signings, they've only made 2, which, could be a bit concerning, but I think they're also backing the people that are there. Rex Slattery and Jaden White joined the club. I like the signing of Rex Slattery especially. I think having another big mad forward is exactly what they need. Take a bit of pressure off Johnny Nanai and Logan Strange. And then notable losses, they only have lost 1 guy so far, I believe, unless they've got some players in free agency, which I will check. But they have lost to Tyler Maxwell, which is a pretty big loss. He's a pretty good player, but I think that they can replace him pretty easily. So I'm going to go ahead and give their recruitment and retention I guess I've set a B+ in my notes simply because they've only lost 1 guy and they've signed 2, and one of them is exactly what they needed. However, I think they probably could have gone to market a little bit more. Seeing that they did miss the finals, maybe try and get, there's a couple of pretty good halves on the market, like an Ash Crutcher and Isaac Edwards would have really suited the club. But, I also do think that they are headed in the right direction. Now, the last club I have to go through, it is my Canberra Raiders. I'm going to try and make this one pretty brief. I think I'm a bit too biased to be talking about this one. But I think it was just an error-riddled season, if I'm honest. We just made too many stupid mistakes in games. I think we would have had one of the lowest completion rates in the comp. And I think the other thing that really let us down, was our loyalty, in the sense that we took way too long to experiment with the side. We didn't move our forwards around nearly enough. Mark Iron was in fullback for 5 out of the 7 games? Yeah, I think 5 out of the 7 games. We didn't really give too many other people a chance. I think Sonny Tyre probably should have had a bit of starting time too, but, the whole season was so disruptive with our inactives. We lost a lot of really good forwards that we were hoping would have got us rolling downfield. Would have done a lot of work for us. We had to replace them with rookies due to inactivity. We kept Sonny Tyre, but he was inactive the whole season, so we couldn't move him onto the wing like we originally intended to. Yeah, it was a tough season, but we showed lots of flashes of good footy, especially in that last game, which I'll get into in a minute. But I think the emergence of Ben Arnold, Jordan Lewis, and Wally Allen was a massive positive, especially Jordan Lewis. I think I just said Jordan Williams, but anyway, Jordan Lewis, sorry. Jordan Lewis is a really good young prop, and he's really fitted in well at the club, so I'm excited about that signing. For our MVP, I've gone with Luke Thompson. I think we all were sort of on the same level this season, but I think Luke might have just been above the rest of us. He was really, really strong. He averaged 144 run meters and 138 kick meters per game. Our best performance was our last round performance, our 40-4 win up against the Penrith Panthers. I was really proud of that game. Whereas the worst performance, I'm going to go with our first round loss to the Cowboys, where we lost 26-0. So bad, definitely a performance I'm going to want to forget because we were all really, really poor in that game. As for our notable signings, I'm excited about the acquisition of Tim James during the mid-season, but we've signed some pretty exciting players. We got Eli Barnes coming across from Parramatta. Jason Laumu is going to provide a lot of strike in the centres for us, and also Jordan Williams, I think, is a really consistent forward. Replacing Luke Malkus, who is one of our notable losses, along with Mark Iron, who is one of our club great, so it's really sad to see him go. Dominic Toretto, who had a really good impact when he joined us mid-season. Jonty McGuinnesskin, one of my good mates. I'm pretty sad to see him leave, but at the same time, it was time we need to get a bit of experience in our forward pack, and the other guy leaving was Samuel Atchison. But I'm going to go ahead and give our recruitment and retention rating, I would say an A-, because even though we lost more players than we gained, the players that we gained were exactly what we needed. We needed some more control in the middle, which Tim James brings. We needed a bit more consistency in the forwards, which Jordan Williams brings. We need some strike at the back and in the centres, which Eli Barnes and Jason Laumu have brought as well. But that's going to be all we have time for on today's podcast, guys. I hope you did enjoy. A bit of a shorter one. I wanted to try and keep this one short. A pretty busy week for myself. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you comment all your thoughts on the podcast, all the things I've said today. Let's have a civilized discussion down there. And I will see you in the next podcast.